As part of the EU Green Week, we had a similar event on wetlands. Well, this year we're putting on the spotlight marine pollution, a hugely important topic that affects each and every one of us. We have a very exciting program lined up today for you, and we have over 180 participants who have registered for this event, representing the many interested groups such as scientists, NGOs, and decision makers. And I see that we have many colleagues from even outside the Mediterranean joining us, from other parts of Europe and even further afield. So we're delighted to have each and every one of you today, wherever you are based. I'm confident that you will find today's sessions inspiring, informative, interesting, but most importantly, interactive, because we want to.
Hello, so I think we lost the connection with our moderator. I don't know if you can see her anymore, but on my side, I cannot. So we will try to fix the problem, and in the meantime, maybe Mireia, if you can start sharing the presentation.
Yes.
So we will move with what Anushka was going to introduce. So now we have a keynote speech from Mr. Mohamed Kayal that is working with the MedPol program, which is a UNEP MAP activity center that is working on pollution, representing the Barcelona Convention. So I will give the floor to Mr. Kayal, and we will put the slide on the screen. So Mireia, I think it's slide 4, if you can show that. Mr. Kayal, if you want to open your microphone, and I give you the floor to introduce us the event and the topic of the event.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Thank you, dear colleagues, representatives. Thank you very much for this invitation. As head of MedPol, on behalf of UNEP MAP, Secretariat for the Barcelona Convention for Protection Mediterranean Sea from Pollution, I'd like to welcome you to this event. And my keynote speech will basically address the pressure, status, and impacts Mediterranean, specifically focusing on marine litter. The Mediterranean Sea is a closed basin. It has a coastal population of over 210 million inhabitants. It is considered the first tourist destination in the world. Over 320 million visitors come to Mediterranean every year. It receives waste from coastal zones and many large rivers and urbanized cities. Almost 200 tons of plastic enter Mediterranean Sea every year. More than 20% of global maritime traffic passes through the Mediterranean, and it produces over 2 gigatons of CO2, which is equivalent to almost 5% of the world emissions of CO2. Next slide. Yes. The Mediterranean, as a result of these pressures that the Mediterranean is exposed to, its status is impacted in a big way. Over 500 million items are currently lying on Mediterranean seafloor, with densities exceeding 100,000 items per square kilometer. It is considered one of the most affected regions in the world with plastic, and specifically the area, the Levantine on the eastern side of Mediterranean. Over 50% of marine litter found on the seabed is plastic. The concentrations of microplastics exceed the maximum threshold and reach more than 64 million floating particles per square kilometer. In a recent project that we have undertaken, funded by the European Union, we found that over 33 beaches indicated that 5 types of debris, mostly single-use plastics, are found and represent more than 60% of what was found there, like trays, straws, cigarette butts, cap lids, plastic bottles, shopping bags. of the total marine litter found on a beach. And this percentage has not changed, and the items have not changed in the past in 5 years after, as we can see in 8 Mediterranean countries. Next slide, please. So the impacts, the impacts that we see on the Mediterranean right now, it is undergoing warming 20% faster rate than a global average, already 0.4 degrees Celsius higher, and up to 3.5 degrees Celsius by 2100, year 2100. Creatures, marine creatures are ingesting microplastics. Marine turtles, over 80% of them are affected. The noise pollution is putting many species in danger. Sea level rise between 43 centimeters and expected to reach 2.5 meters by the year 2100. As a consequence of this situation, we have increased risk for 20 million people living below the 5 meters of current sea level. We have more heat waves, coastal erosion, fires, invasive species, acidification of the sea, floods, and less modification migration with risk of extinction of certain species. Quality aquaculture, fishing, and agriculture production are also affected. Next slide, please. In the Secretariat for Barcelona Convention, United Nations Environment Programme Mediterranean Action Plan, we are attempting to do many things to help Mediterranean, as it is our key role. In 2013, the contracting parties, the 21 countries and European Union of the Mediterranean, adopted the regional plan on marine litter management Mediterranean. This plan comes under Article 15 of Land-Based Sources Protocol, one of the 6 protocols under the Barcelona Convention. The plan became binding on 8 July 2014. It was the first marine litter regional plan adopted in the regional seas and the first in the world under the Regional Seas Convention. It includes obligations regarding waste management, closure of illegal dump sites, shifting sustainable consumption production, removal of existing marine litter. As a result of this regional plan, we managed to secure financial resources for technical capacity building at national and regional levels, and we achieved many achievements were made. Keynote of these harmonized marine litter indicators were defined to monitor the status of marine litter pollution in Mediterranean. Around the Mediterranean, 19 national action plans are currently in place to deal with marine litter, and 17 Mediterranean countries have relevant regulations and national laws with regards to total and partial bans and tax and levies related to marine litter. Next slide. Among other related achievements, MAP Secretariat and the components, regional activity centers that are tied with the UNEP MAP, have developed a series of regional guidelines for marine litter prevention reduction. And I here specifically, I make note of the contribution of the Sustainable Consumption Production Regional Activity Center, SCP-RAC in Barcelona. We have guidelines for fishing for litter, adopt beach measures, phasing out single-use plastic bags, operational guidelines on a provision of reception facilities in ports and delivery of ship-generated waste. It's developed by REMPEC, the Regional Activity Center for Emergencies. And we have a guidance document to determine the applications of chargeable reasonable costs for use of port reception facilities. We also have introduced a cooperation platform for marine litter, including specialized agencies, NGOs, and other industry representatives working together to see how we can cooperate to prevent and reduce impacts of marine litter. And the Mediterranean node was established, and this node today represents other nodes across the globe related to marine litter. Next slide. Going into this year, we have recognized the importance of adapting and addressing additional upcoming issues related to marine litter in a regional plan. So COP'21 to Barcelona Convention, which was held in December 2019, adopted the decision to upgrade the marine litter regional plan, which came in effect in 2013. We introduced additional principles and measures to be addressed in this regional plan, like phasing out the use of single plastic items, setting targets for recycling and other waste items, introducing environmental taxes, promoting new technologies for removal of marine litter, strengthening sanctions in case of non-compliance, including specially protected areas in the Mediterranean to combat marine litter, reducing packaging, voluntary agreements with industry, strengthening measures to sustainable consumption and production programs, and introducing concrete measures on microplastic reductions, all in a framework of circular economy. This regional plan will be presented to COP'22, which will meet in December 2021, i.e. in about 6 months. And hopefully it will be adopted by contracting parties, and this updated regional plan will take effect in lieu of the 2013 regional plan. This, Madam Chair, will represent the key aspects of our work in this area. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's really, really great to hear all the great work that MedPol is doing. So we're happy to hear all this. Before we continue with the rest of the events, maybe we can just do a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing I would ask for you to do, if you've not already done so, is to make sure that all of you have your full name and institution on your screen. For anyone who's not sure how to do this, if you go to your name on the bottom left of your screen and right-click, you will see an option for renaming. It's that simple. The second very important thing I want to tell you is that after lunch, we'll be having our call to actions. And right here today, you will have the opportunity to actively do something to show your commitment towards a cleaner and healthier Mediterranean. But to find out what that is, you'll just have to make sure to join us after lunch. And lastly, all microphones will be deactivated except for facilitators and speakers. So please use the chats if you have any comments, questions, or input, or if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, which we saw can happen at the beginning of this workshop. You can either post them in the group chat or directly to the hosts, facilitators, or speakers. If you do have a specific question for one of the speakers, please make sure you place the name in the chat box, followed by your question or comment so we know who it's for. And please, don't be shy to contribute. After all, the whole point of today's meeting is for us to come together to find the best solutions to achieve zero pollution in the Mediterranean so that we can all be healthier people and live on a healthier planet. So today provides us immense opportunity for us all to learn from each other and to share our experiences and ideas. And I thought to myself, since experts are gathering to discuss this issue, it would be interesting to hear from the next generation of scientists. And so I reached out to some friends in schools to ask their children, what do they think the grown-ups should do about the marine pollution problem? And as I'm sure you can imagine, we had some very insightful answers. Here are just a few of their words of wisdom. We should go into boats with a rubbish scooper, reuse plastic. My teacher has had the same lunchbox for 8 years. Don't eat McDonald's, they have plastic in them. Educate those that don't understand. Tell your kids, friends, and families not to throw rubbish. Talk to your president. Get a better government to do something. But not all children were so forthcoming with their ideas. And as Miguel, age 9, said, rather angrily, grown-ups should sort it out and not leave it to the children. So let today be the day that I report back to them to tell them that we hear them and we are working very hard to sort it out. So let's start by looking at what some of the things that the grown-ups currently recommend. Back in 2018, as part of the Panacea project to achieve a cleaner Mediterranean, 9 key recommendations and actions were identified. These 9 recommendations are shown now on this screen. The first and second recommendations are to enhance our knowledge on marine litter and its impacts, and to improve and refine litter assessment protocols. Our third recommendation centers around sharing and building capacity in management and monitoring tools for marine litter with local managers and stakeholders. Our fourth and seventh recommendations focus on the sources of marine litter, tackling unsustainable production and consumption and sea-based sources. Recommendations 6 and 7 speak to a greater cooperation and coordination across borders and across sectors, with recommendation 8 placing a great emphasis on the involvement and awareness of local stakeholders and civil society about marine litter issues and actions. And lastly, but by no means least, our final recommendation is to ensure that the sustainability of the Interreg Mediterranean biodiversity protection community's achievements are maintained by creating links with other Mediterranean-wide knowledge platforms on marine litter so that available resources are easily accessible, transferable, and replicated. Now, by the end of today, as a result of what we learn and the discussions and debates we will have, we aim to have an increased understanding of our progress and to be better placed to revise and refine these recommendations for moving forward. So we would now like to hear from you. Which of these recommendations do you feel are the most important if we are to combat marine pollution? I invite you all now to click on the link provided, which will take you to a Mentimeter poll. If the link is there, we're not sure if we can see it, it's coming. Now, please don't log out of Zoom, but the link will take you to another tab where you will see these 9 recommendations. And we ask you to please select the top 3 recommendations in your opinion that you feel are most important to combat marine pollution. Now, once you're in the link and have answered the question, please stay there as we have 2 more questions we would like to ask you. So if we can all try now to connect to the link, if anyone is having any problems, please let us know in the chat box and someone from our team will try and help you. So you'll see on the screen, we will have the 9 recommendations. There's a code you need to put in once you click on the link, place the code that's placed in the chat box, and then you should be able to access the poll and simply click on the top 3 recommendations that you feel are the most important to combat pollution. So we'll give it a few minutes and let's see if we're able to get people to link. Okay, great. I see already we have people clicking. You see that they're moving right now. Tackling unsustainable production and consumption to prevent litter generation is coming up as top. Do we still have others? More votes coming in. It's like watching a race. Okay, we see that marine litter data and information is moving up and down. We still see that tackling unsustainable production and consumption to prevent litter generation. So tackling it at the source is still coming out as number 1, followed by cross-border cooperation, specifically with non-EU countries. I think we still have some more votes coming in. Okay, so it looks like, some more votes. Okay, so I think we see that there's a very clear priority or one that we feel that should be the most important, and that's to tackle unsustainable production and consumption. Okay, maybe we can go to the next question or the next poll. So the next question that we have for you is, in your opinion, what is the most critical impact of pollution on biodiversity? And we ask that you would just put 1 word in. So if we stay on the link, we're going to enter 1 word and see what everyone's opinions are on the most critical impact of pollution on biodiversity. Okay, there we go, it's coming up. So again, you should be able to stay in the same tab and this question will come up. And in 1 word, if you could really state what your opinion, the most critical impact of pollution on biodiversity. So we have ecosystem degradation, toxicology, injuries and death, toxic chemicals, toxicology, water quality, ingestion. So we see that toxicology is really coming out as a strong, strong word here. The bigger the word, the more people have actually said this word. But importantly, what we can see is that there are many critical impacts of pollution on biodiversity. Synergies of contaminants, ingestion, degradation, lack of awareness, intoxication. We'll maybe fill up this screen with all our words of the critical impacts of biodiversity. Okay, fantastic. And now for the final question that I would like, we still have words coming in, fantastic. Okay, we'll give it another couple of seconds. Okay, great. So we see that loss, toxicology, ecosystem degradation are coming out as really critical issues. Extinction, many critical issues on biodiversity. So now we want to ask you one final question. And this time, what is your opinion is the most critical impact of pollution on our health? So just like we did before about the biodiversity question, if you could all just type in one word to see what, in your opinion, is the most critical impact of pollution on health. Again, toxicity, sickness, endocrine disruptors, sensitivity, chronic exposure. As for biodiversity, we see that there are many, many critical impacts also on our health, not just on biodiversity. Our food and water quality can be impacted by pollution. Disease. Our mental health, our quality of life, it can have many, many impacts on our health. Even our mental health. Okay, this is great. So let's move swiftly on so we don't bite into all the other sessions if there have some really fantastic and interesting topics and discussions to be held. There are going to be 3 main sessions and they will occur throughout the day. Our first session will be on what we already know and importantly what we don't know but need to know, followed by a second session on the policies and actions that are currently being carried out. And after lunch, we will have our session 3, which will be all about the impacts and practical solutions towards marine litter, as well as our call for actions. And remember, right here today, you will have a chance to show your commitment. Sounds good? Okay, so let's not delay any further and go straight to our sessions. I'll hand you over to Christina Fossi, who'll be facilitating session 1, all about what we know on marine litter impacts on biodiversity and health in the region. Christina is a professor at the University of Siena in Italy and has spent the past 10 years studying marine litter and microplastics in the environment and their effects on marine organisms. Thanks for being here, Christina, and we look forward to a very informative session.
Thank you very much, Anushka, and thank you very much to my friends of the biodiversity community to organize, I think, this very important meeting today. And it's a great pleasure to chair this section. And I would like to give a very great welcome to all the participants and particularly to the speakers. As you can see from the titles, we have a very difficult challenge to try to answer. So what we know about the European and Mediterranean marine litter impact on biodiversity and health. If I can have the second slide, please. As previously mentioned from our colleague Mohamed Kayal from UNEP, we know that the marine litter in Mediterranean Sea is extremely important impact on biodiversity because the Mediterranean Sea from macro and microplastic is one of the most exposed area worldwide. So I would like to say that as ecology and ecotoxicology, one of our main obligation is to try to give an answer of this question. Please, the next one. So how can marine litter really impact Mediterranean marine life and Mediterranean biodiversity? In order to try to give some answer to this very and challenging question, we have this very interesting section in which we have involved a lot of speakers, both on the academic sector and on the governance one, that both together try to give an interlink answer to the from science and policy. So I would like to say that this section is particularly focused on the try to link together how science can improve the governance and how governance can really give more effort to obtain more information on this field. Next slide, please. So in order, as I mentioned before, to try to focus on this main important factor, we have subdivided the section in different slots. In the first one, myself and my friend Dania, we can give a very overall introduction concerning these topics. And also we will touch some gap and some emerging topics that need to be covered from science in the future. But after that, we open the floor to the scientific point of view on the main research and science focus on threatened species and commercial species. And so we will focus on cetacean, sea turtles, monk seal, and commercial fish species. In order to give support of all this information, we have a very fantastic speakers that have a lot of experience in this field, and I will describe later on introducing itself in this specific bio. Then one of the subjects that was, could you come back to the next slide, please? The very important aspect is also the ocean health and human health. That is one of the main topics that we touch during the section itself. And finally, we will open the discussion in terms of what really science needs to improve governance and vice versa. And so we open the discussion with the two very special guests, Lobna Ben-Hanahad from UNEP MAP CPRAC and Celia Revalek from ACCOBAMS. If you can move to the next slide, as I said previously, we have a very nice parterre of scientists and actors that working on this field, the Mediterranean field, and I will introduce the speakers with a short bio before the presentation. We have Dania from the Malaga University, as you know, is the coordinator of the biodiversity community. We have a colleague of my lab, Cristina Panti, an expert of marine mammal ecotoxicology, Holfa Cayenne, that will come from Tunisia, as one of the experts of sea turtles in the Mediterranean Sea. Then we move to another group of animals that are very, I can say, emblematic in the Mediterranean as an endangered species, monk seal, and we heard the nice presentation from Mercedes Munas-Canas on this topic. And finally, we have colleagues from HMR in Greece that will discuss about the impact of marine litter on commercial species. The next slide. As I mentioned before, we touch other important subjects, such as the interaction between ocean and human health, and Fabio Serafin will give a very interesting topic on that. And we conclude our section with an interaction between science and policy with the two special guests, Celia Rabak and Ben Nahabo. So that is just the introduction of the section, and I would like just to move on my first slide, if I can have, in which I would like to focus what, on our point of view, is represent some of the new challenge to monitor the impact of marine litter on Mediterranean biodiversity. And if I can have the first slide, please. The next one, please. As you probably know, the topic of impact of microplastic on biodiversity is represent a very important trend topic, not only from the governance point of view and the public opinion, but particularly from the scientific point of view. And we have seen a very dramatic increasing of publication in the last 10 years. On our point of view, so from the group that I'm leading from the University of Siena, please, the first approach that we have on this topic was in the 2012, so we are quite pioneeristic in this, and we try to investigate the potential impact of microplastic on Mediterranean Sea, and particularly on marine mammals. Next slide, please. What emerged on general terms when you ask to some scientists what you can define the impact of microplastic on marine organisms, the answer is extremely complex. You can go from invertebrate to marine mammals with a wide range of different toxicological and physical effects. So we have a lot of attention in the previous Mentimeter on the words toxicology. In fact, microplastic can generate a lot of negative effects related to transport of contaminant, leaching additive, physical harm, and virus and bacteria. So in other words, this plastic and microplastic can generate a multiple stress on marine organisms. Next slide, please. Next, please. And so as ecologists and ecotoxicology, our obligation is, first of all, to try to answer to the main question, so detect the real impact on marine litter on Mediterranean species, but also our extra obligation, next please, is try to support the governance in terms to orientate the monitoring activity, and so why we work a lot in the selection of new bioindicator to measure the impact of marine litter on Mediterranean Sea. Next slide, please. So we have worked in the first approach a lot of, please, if you can move to the next one, to try to understand one of the main goals of the impact of macro and microplastic on the megafauna. And we have realized a lot of information in terms of how really marine mammals can be strongly impacted to these. But in the same time, the next slide, we focus on, next slide, please, on other important species, next please, such as sea turtle, that we know is the common indicator defined from marine strategy and IMAP candidate. And also we move to explore how, next slide, commercial species such as fish can be extremely impacted from the impact of plastic and microplastic. And in the next slide, you can see that emerge also the link between the presence of plastic in edible species and human health. But all this information, and if you can move to the next slide, really enforce the concept that I have previously said. Next slide, please. How is important to transform this information in a dialogue between science and policy. And that is the main goal, next slide, please, that we have for our project, Plastic Buster MPAs. And we have a lot of information concerning this. Next slide, please, particularly in terms of novelty of the project from the diagnosis in biota. And what we focused in the next slide is select a wide range of different bioindicators, and my colleagues later on will focus on these. But
Christine,
also,
can we please, start wrapping up and move
yes,
on. Thank you.
the last slide. Thank you very much. Then last one. And a part of this is extremely important, the next one, please, to focus on a new approach that will be described from my colleague later on concerning the real detection of toxicological effect on endangered species. That is the end of my talk, and my final message is, please, the next two is just to give a support from science to policy and to orientate from the diagnosis of the impact, the mitigation on Mediterranean scale. So that is my general message. And if you can move to the next two slides, I would like to give the floor to my friends and colleagues from the Malaga University, and as we know, is also the main coordinator of the biodiversity community in InterRegMed consortium. And it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Dania Abdul Balak, that is the director of European Topic Center Spatial Analysis and System. Dania is over 15 years experience in the environmental assessment and management, and he work support the evidence behind the implementation of different global regional directives, such as the Convention on Biology Diversion, Barcelona Convention. So I think that Dania represents really the great link between science and policy. And Dania, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you a lot, Christina, for this nice introduction, and welcome again to everyone. It's really very exciting to have you all here, especially looking at possible solutions now on this very complex issue or additional pollution source that is marine litter. So from my side, I will not be long. I just wanted to introduce you to a tool that was developed by the Mediterranean Biodiversity Protection Community back in 2017, after an assessment together with a big range of partners, friends and institutions that belong to this community, knowing that this community has over 300 institutions that are connected to it. So looking at or assessing what is really missing, what could be useful, the results came out that we need to build on knowledge. A knowledge base is important to understand what is happening, what is impacted, where the impacts on biodiversity are, how we can locate them, the sources of marine litter impacting which type of species. So all of this assessment and thinking made us go towards developing this MedBioLitter, which is an online open source database looking into, or knowledge base, I would say, looking into how globally to put together all the knowledge that is peer-reviewed, so coming really from the evidence side, validated from the science towards supporting different types of stakeholders. So this is an online database. You can see a map representing what this database has. You will not see everything very well, but afterwards you will have the chance to even look and play with the database. I will inform you how later on. But for your understanding, this is a wall-to-wall Mediterranean-wide knowledge base that has been updated, as I mentioned, that has been developed in 2017, regularly updated twice a year, so every 6 months since its beginning. It's currently, so every version includes what is coming out from the peer-reviewed information and puts them in a way that is communicating to different types of stakeholders. In the time being, so the latest update has been done in March 2021, and the results so far include 107 peer-reviewed articles that have looked into the effects or the impacts of marine litter on biota. And it is providing information on the impacts of 138 marine species. The outcomes, as you can see in the dots, I hope you can see at least in the map, they touch 754 sites across the Mediterranean. As you can see in the map, we always have the issue that we have less knowledge in part of the Mediterranean. Sadly speaking, the southern and eastern part are data poor areas that need, so that's already one important message, that needs more financing and more evidence and science to be developed in those areas. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick reflection. So as we know, I mean, as Christina clearly mentioned, it's really a complex topic. What are these interactions? Where are they happening? On which type of species? In which part of the water column do they happen, and so on? So this MedBioLitter provides real information on the location and type of impacts that we can see they vary. You could look at the different types of impacts. For example, you can see that overall ingestion seems to be like the major outcome resulting as injuries and deaths in marine biota, while also other sources of impacts do happen, and they differ if it's in the pelagic system or in the benthic system. It looks into the type of habitat, so the ecological sensitivity is part of what you can understand when you look into the data that is in there, and it certainly supports understanding whether certain management regimes applied in the Mediterranean do support or not some mitigation towards these species. If we can move further, please. Yes.
May I ask you, Daria, if we could quickly, if we could wrap up, please?
Certainly.
That would be great.
Yes, yes. So in which way this is useful for decision-making or for management topics? It is an important evidence, so it sets this basis to use evidence to guide action, to guide policy. It is very user-friendly, as you will be saying. It ensures understanding where prioritization could happen, prevention, cleaning, where this is happening, where is it more important, connecting the ecological sensitivity, so the pressure from marine litter to the ecological sensitivity of the areas. So certainly it is a support tool to guide decisions. It is a gap in the Mediterranean, and this could be a very useful way for different types of stakeholders to have a look before taking local to regional actions in the region. When it comes to transboundary actions, so countries need to tackle this transboundary issue together. We think that it makes lots of sense to use it because it's really building on the evidence, not on the countries' boundaries. That's normally is an issue not tackled when we manage things. And I think that's it. It was just a very brief introduction to this tool. If we can move to the last slide, just to invite everyone to have this fancy trip with us before breaking for lunch. We will have an interactive session of 5 to 8 minutes, where you will have the chance to go to the online tool to have a look at it after a very brief introduction from my colleagues on its uses and how the look and feel and how it can provide you with information. So more to come, and please join us before the lunch break to have this interesting tour so you could tackle a bit and understand more what is the usefulness of this tool. And I thank you all for that, and I wish you all a very fruitful meeting.
Thank you very much. And we can move to the first slot. And if I can have the next slide, the first slot is concerning what we are the ecological impact on species. If you can move on the next slide, please. We have, as mentioned before, 4 very nice speakers that will cover different endangered and commercial species, but most of that they have to try to answer to the 3 main questions that are reported in the slide. And with this slide, I would like to invite the next speakers that will be Cristina Panti from Siena University. So she's working our team. If I have the next slide, I can introduce Cristina. Cristina will discuss about the impact on cetaceans. Cristina Panti is a researcher of University of Siena, as she has a very strong experience on molecular and ecotoxicological investigation to assess and monitor the impact on cetaceans and other top predators and the marine environment. She's particularly involved in the last 10 years in the study of the impact of microplastic on endangered species. Please, Cristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Cristina and Dania, for the introduction. And if I can have my presentation, please. Okay, so I will talk briefly on the impact of marine litter on cetaceans. Next, please. So just to answer to the three main questions that Christina told before, what do we know about the type and the effects of the level of marine litter impacts on cetaceans? We know that most of the suborders of cetaceans are exposed to the entanglement and ingestion of marine debris, and over the 60% of all cetacean species are affected by this type of pollution. But we should bear in mind that marine mammals are not only exposed to marine litter, but a variety and a plethora of stresses, including chemical pollution. If we look at the distribution of the studies on marine litter and interaction with the cetacean, what we can see is that there are sparse around the world, and regarding marine mammals, they are mainly focused on pinnipeds, and with a close-up on Mediterranean Sea, the studies are very, very limited. Next slide, please. And what type of marine litter and pollution can affect cetaceans? We should do a kind of distinguish between the different species, because they have a different habitat use and different trophic level and habits. So, for instance, if we look at the deep diving cetaceans, they are particularly prone to the ingestion entanglement due to their feeding habit and habitat use in submarine canyons that in the Mediterranean Sea are sink of pollutions. So it's been demonstrated that they can ingest fishing-related items, single-use plastics, in particular bags, and mostly plastics. Next, please. And marine litter ingestion per mile has been, if we look at the worldwide scientific literature, Mediterranean Sea is a hotspot of ingestion for the ingestion of marine litter in one of the most distributed deep diver cetacean species. Next. But also instead considering the filter feeding marine mammals, more filter feeding cetaceans, fin whales can be considered in Mediterranean Sea, can be considered particularly threatened to the microplastic effects due to the filtrating activity of these species. And by studying the overlap between concentration of marine debris and microplastics on the sea surface and on the water column, fin whales appear to be really threatened. But what we need to know more. Next slide, please. For sure, the gap that need to be filled is an harmonization of methodological protocols, because due to the difficulties to manage these and to obtain samples from these taxa, the harmonization of protocols is mandatory. And also in order to obtain data to be compared worldwide. But another issue another gap that needs to be filled is to determine the real effects on the health of animals of these species, both from a toxicological point of view, from the physical point of view, and also looking at the pathogenic effects that can be due to the ingestion of marine litter and the multiple stress that cetaceans are facing. So these are my main three points. So I would like to thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Christina. Very precise the discussion about the toxicological effect on marine mammals, and particularly the new frontier that science need to solve in terms to preserve these very important charismatic animals in the Mediterranean Sea. But now I would like to move to another very important group of organisms, again, a very charismatic species for the Mediterranean Sea, that is the sea turtles. In this case, I would like to invite my colleagues and friend, Olfa Kaib, that is, as you know, one of the experts on Mediterranean Sea on the study of the impact on marine litter on particularly Caretta caretta. Olfa is a scientist that works in the Institute of Natural Science and Technology del Mer in Tunisia, and she is involved in the last decade in a lot of projects for the conservation activity of endangered invertebrates, in particular marine mammals. Olfa is involved in several European projects, and particularly Ingestion 2, and also our common project, Common. Olfa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christina, and I'm happy to see you on my screen. Just to correct the pronunciation of my name is Olfa Sheib. So as Christina said, I will talk briefly. Yeah, I will briefly talk about the impact of marine litter on sea turtles. There's a charismatic species. As all we know, sea turtles are among the most, one of the most species impacted by marine litter. Next, please. Marine litter and sea turtles have been chosen as a bioindicator to monitor marine litter in the seas. And this is because of several reasons. First of all, sea turtles are long-lived species. They are big migratory animals. They have a large spatial distribution. They can live in pelagic and benthic habitats, and they can feed in the oceanic or in neritic zones. Also, sea turtles tend to ingest marine debris because they confuse it to food. And in this context, the 4-year Indesit programs have been developed to implement indicators for marine litter impacts on sea turtles and other marine biota. And the aim of the project is to define threshold values to which the good environmental status is achieved in RSC and MSFD areas. Next, please. So sea turtles are impacted by different types of marine litter. We can find plastic, lost fishing gears, and oil. The main impact include entanglement and ingestion, and the consequences of these interactions could be obstruction and perforation of the digestive tract, impaired feeding and nutrition, internal trauma, and in some cases, death. Next, please. So plastic is the type of litter that most impact sea turtles, and results from Indesit 2 project showed that plastic represents 94% of the total litter ingested by sea turtles. Also, we found that about 57% of the turtles have ingested plastic. Results also show that 2.72 grams of plastic have been ingested by one turtle. And the plastic ingested derive mainly from land-based sources. Next, please. Entanglement in plastic materials have also been analyzed through standard protocol and mass media review. And the main category of litter derived from fisheries, mainly fishing nets and fishing lines, and also from land-based sources by plastic bags, and particularly the heavy-duty sacks. Next, please. So in this slide, I will focus on the gaps that still remain about the impact of marine litter on sea turtles. Actually, the impact on health of plastic on sea turtles is still poorly understood. Direct mortality related to physical effects caused by obstruction and perforation of the digestive system are relatively rare. However, chemical sublethal effects related to chemical to hazardous chemicals are likely to be more present, and these include the leaching of toxic plastic additive and polymeric raw materials. Also, we can find the absorption of persistent organic pollutants and other chemicals from the environment. And we can find also the concentration of microplastic in the digestive tract of sea turtles. Also, plastic can act as a vector to transport microorganisms that could be pathogenic, and we can find viruses and bacteria. So because of all these reasons, ecotoxicological and microbiological investigations are really needed to improve knowledge on the impact of this plastic on the health of the turtles, and to better evaluation of this question. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olfa, for this very precise and concise presentation. I think both for your talk and the Christina one emerge how the ecotoxicological gap need to be covered. Then I think we can move to another very interesting, important and charismatic species in the Mediterranean Sea, the endangered monk seals. And we have the extremely pleasure to invite as speakers Mercedes Munez from UCN, that she will give some very important information concerning the impact on these endangered species. Thank you, Mercedes.
So thank you very much. Please, next slide. Now it's time, as Christina was saying, to talk a little bit about monk seals and how the marine litter could impact this emblematic species. Before doing or trying to answer those questions, I just put this slide to let you understand how rare this species is. As you can see, this is the only pinniped that is autochthonous to the Mediterranean Sea. And the overall estimated population is of 700 individuals, of which almost half of it live on the Atlantic Ocean. That means that around 400 or 350 animals are the ones that are inhabiting the Mediterranean Sea, mainly in the areas that are highlighted in brown in this map. But I have to say that thanks to all the conservation efforts that have been done in the last decades, we can say that the monk seal is increasing in numbers, and in 2015 it was downlisted from critically endangered to endangered in the IUCN Red List. So next slide, please. Now that you understand how rare this species is, you can understand that not much is known about the interaction of the marine litter and the species. But we know for sure that one of the biggest impacts that are affecting the species is especially the entanglement on fishing nets, especially if these fishing nets were placed nearby the breeding caves, because juveniles of these species are really curious and they like to play. So if they see like a loose rope, or they will just roll up and they get entangled quite easily. When I say here they're affecting on ingestion, it's not really direct ingestion of plastics. We've seen animals playing with the plastic, but not eating it. But it's true that not much is known about this. I don't recall any data about ingestion, but it's true that, for example, there is a case when an adult monk seal that was performed an autopsy and they opened the stomach. It was full with pieces of fishing nets, different fishing nets, which means probably that the animal, when went to pick the fishes from the net, he he also picked some nets as well, and they were in the stomach. For sure, it weakened the animal. We don't know if that was the cause of that. And recently, there's been some studies about how there is analyzing feces of the animals, and they found in most of them that the presence of microplastics. How they got there, we don't know, but it could be a trophic transfer from fishes that already have the plastic in their stomachs. But there is more to be known about this. And the last picture, if you can see it there, it's more about the habitat and how the accumulation of marine plastic could be affecting the areas where these species breed, molt, and rest, because even if they are a marine mammal, they use a lot of their time, they spend their time in coastal caves. So next slide, please. I'll just, as you can imagine, there is a lot of gaps and there is a lot of information that needs to be filled for the monk seals. We need to know, for example, what's the rate of entanglement, because they, especially juveniles, they get entangled quite easily, and not only in the fishing nets that I've left outside, but of course traps as well. We've seen animals that got inside the traps and drowned. What is happening with ingestion? Is it a direct ingestion of plastics? We don't think so, but we don't know. And one thing that I think that needs more research is about the habitat. It's true that we've seen a lot of caves that are being with plastics, and the plastics are being accumulated more and more in the caves. Please understand that these animals need the caves, especially to breed and molt, which are two periods of their lives that are really important. For the caves that have been monitored in the past for breeding, it doesn't seem that it affects that much, but we don't know if caves that were used in the past are not used anymore because of the accumulation of plastics. So I think that more information about how this habitat is being transformed due to these plastics could be affecting the species. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk about this emblematic species. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mercedes. And once again, I think we have a lot to work in order to understand the impact of several anthropogenic impact on the species. Then we rapidly move on another very important group of species, and I would like to invite our colleague and friend, Caterina Zangaris, to discuss about the potential impact on marine litter on commercial species. Caterina is a well-known scientist in Mediterranean level. She's involved in a lot of international projects, particularly devoted to study the impact of this emerging issue on commercial and also endangered species. Please, Caterina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christina. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. So I will speak about commercial species, the impact of marine litter on commercial species. Can we go to next slide, please? So commercial species, what we certainly know about commercial species is that they ingest microplastics. Fish and commercial invertebrates such as mollusks and crustaceans do ingest microplastics. There are many records of microplastic ingestion in the Mediterranean in various fish species from various areas of the Mediterranean, including mullets, red mullets, grey mullets, hake, bogs, anchovies, sardines, and so on. And also mollusks, mussels and oysters, shrimps and lobsters from the Mediterranean have been found to ingest microplastics, as well as larger fish like swordfish and tuna ingest microplastics, and also macro and mesoplastic. The most ingested microplastics are mostly fragments and filaments and fibers. The levels of microplastic ingestion, the levels that are reported vary. Actually, there is quite a big variation on the reported levels of ingestion. And this depends largely on the species, relates to the special characteristics of the species, such as feeding preferences, feeding modes, and also, of course, to the habitat of the species. Results vary also according to the sampling area. Usually samples, fish samples or mussel samples taken near an area close to intense anthropogenic activities usually have higher level of microplastic ingestion. And also reported levels vary according to the methodology applied, because there are many different methodologies that are applied currently to assess microplastic ingestion. So there is an urgent need to use harmonized methodologies, and this is widely acknowledged, for monitoring microplastic ingestion in order to have comparable results and be able to have assessments at large scales, at the Mediterranean scale, for example. We need to select bioindicator species. We need to select species that are from different habitats to cover all environmental compartments. And this is proposed by the Plastic Busters MPAs project. Work on bioindicator species is also done in other projects like MedBioLitter and Ingestion 2, and the proposals on species are similar. We also need to harmonize analytical methods, because analytical methods for the detection of microplastic on fish and mussels, because as I said, various methods are used, and we need to have comparability of results. For example, in the Plastic Busters MPAs project, we did an intercalibration exercise to validate two most common methods, most commonly used methods of microplastic detection. We carried out this analysis in 4 labs using same protocols. So the results showed that both methods can be used for to assess microplastic ingestion, and the results were comparable. So this aids the use of these methods for future monitoring. Next slide, please.
Catherine, if we could ask you if you could start wrapping up, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the effects of microplastic ingestion, though, are not very well clarified. They include physical effects and toxic effects due to transfer of chemicals. Effects are mainly investigated in laboratory studies at very high, often not at environmentally realistic concentrations. So we know that there are effects of microplastics, but we don't know what is the actual situation happening in the field, because field studies are very scarce and give only indications, give some indications though that effects are occurring in the field. Next slide, please. So the Plastic Busters MPAs project is currently applying a 3-fold monitoring approach on fish and mussels in 4 areas in Italy, Spain, and Greece, using common protocols. And it aims to assess microplastic ingestion simultaneously with plastic traces analysis in the same animals, in order to assess whether there is transfer of microplastic associated chemicals, and simultaneously, again on the same samples, applying biomarker analysis in order to examine whether there are sublethal effects of microplastic ingestion. So we expect these results to give some, to advance our understanding on microplastic effects in commercial species, which is a gap, because effects are not, it is not very clear if effects are occurring or not, and also on transfer of microplastic associated chemicals on the animals. Thank you for your attention. That's it.
Thank you very much, Caterina, for a very nice presentation. And I think we can summarize that the 4 group of species that we have present today clearly reveal the potential impact of plastic or microplastic on the health of the species. But then it's clear that we have to move on another question. What is the connection between the ocean and human health? And in this case, we move to the next speaker, that will be Fabio Serafin, that will try to cover this very important aspect that is also under the media attention in the last few years. How marine litter affect life in ocean, and how an unhealthy ocean impact human lives. And it's my great pleasure to give the floor to our colleague Fabio Serafin. If you give the next slide, Fabio is a researcher in the National Institute of Public Health and Environment, and today he will focus mainly on this very interesting project called Sophie 2020. Please, Fabio.
Thank you, Christina, for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for being here as well. Also, thanks for the previous speakers, because very valuable information, which ties in very well with the short introduction I'm about to give you about Sophie. So Sophie stands for Seas, Oceans, and Public Health in Europe, which is a research project, a pan-European project conducted with our European partners. Can we have a next slide, please? Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a research conducted in collaboration with 8 partners, as you can see on your left picture. It's also an interdisciplinary project with a lot of experts from throughout Europe. So whilst the ocean can also benefit human health and boost well-being through activities like recreation and relaxation, it can also pose risks to human health. So through factors such as flooding and pollution and marine litter as a topic of today, this is a complex mix of threats and opportunities interact in ways we don't fully understand yet. So as a maritime continent in Europe, conducting research in this area is important for us to inform habitants and also inform policymakers. So this research spans marine and health communities, and we conducted a lot of research over the past 4 years, from 2017 to 2020, where we talked to different experts, we did citizen science, we did literature review, we held workshops, and also to gather information from local experts and also citizens on their view and experience on how they perceive the human health and access to ocean, and what's important to them and what the trends are in their perspective. So informed by these activities, the Sophie project highlighted the pros and cons. So what impacts have, which activities have positive impacts and negative impacts. Please, for the next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, so as you can see in this picture, this is a very tangled net between the activities that impact positively and negatively the human health as well as ocean health. So these interconnections and interrelations between healthy oceans, human activities, and healthy humans, some of which are highlighted in this, are not well documented or researched. So given this complexity, our experts highlighted 3 main focus targets for this research to provide, to make sure that we have more insight and also to further focus more research on it. Next slide, please. Yes, so what we have encountered is that through our policy research that we have various different policies targeting marine environmental health or the economy or human health and well-being. What we have seen there are, for example, for marine environmental health and the economy, there are links mentioned in the policy, but there's no concrete harmonization in those policies. As for the human health and well-being and the economy, there are also links, but not in the marine domain. For example, the blue economy focuses on the economy, but not necessarily the marine domain as in a health perspective for ocean health. And for the marine environmental health and the human health and well-being, we have seen many links, but no explicit policy targeting both domains. So this poses several challenges for us, the research community. So this highlights that with single policy at the European national level, there is not coherence in approach, because a lot of countries work on a national level, which do not, which does not, how do you say it, collaborate with others, because and often we have from European level, at European level, we work towards those challenges, but we also have to make sure we have more information and more data to inform the policymakers. Can we have the next slide, please? So as I mentioned before, we identified 3 targets more focused on from the Sophie outcome. Target number 1 is sustainable seafood and healthy people, because from the research we identified that for food from the oceans and for fish and seafood to be healthy, nutritious and safe access to all, we all need to make sure we have to ensure sustainability of fisheries in aquaculture. So one of the main questions was, what are the potential cumulative effects of chemical and microbial pollution, contaminants of all kinds in fish and seafood? Like a previous speaker I mentioned, we have a lot of information about the microplastic, but we still don't know how these exactly affect on the long term. As for the target number 2, the blue space in tourism, so we have seen that it improves individual and community physical and mental health and well-being through enhanced interaction with healthy and blue spaces through a sustainable management. So what do we mean by that? So we can look at how can we organize ocean and human health interactions in order to obtain a physical and mental health and well-being in a sustainable manner for all people and also the species, because often we recreate in their habitat. And for the 3rd target, the marine biodiversity, biotechnology, and medicine, we looked at how do we have a more targeted approach to explore and identify and obtain what marine biodiversity can offer us in terms of biotechnology, medicine, and disease prevention. Also, while demonstrating the critical importance of marine biodiversity in its protection, as well as prevention of littering their habitat. Yeah, so I will urge everyone, this is a very short overview of what we have identified within Sophie project. It's a very large project, which unfortunately we don't have enough time to go into depth. I would urge everyone to visit our website. Next slide.
If we could wrap up.
Yes, this is the last slide. I will urge everyone to visit our website, sophie2020.eu, to have a more in-depth information about this project, and also how you can use the information from the research strategy we've gathered for you to also provide to your policymakers, and also for inform the research community on how to mix and embed the ocean health and human health together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Fabio, for the very interesting presentation. And I think all of us, we are very interested to know the final result of the project. And now I would like to move on the last part of our discussion. And in this last part, I think is extremely important to stress how the science and the information that we have obtained until now in the different labs around the Med can really support the improvement of the governance. In order to discuss this very important topic, we have today 2 very important special guests that I would like to briefly introduce. The first one is Lobna Ben Nahbal. I hope to have pronounced well your surname, but Lobna, sorry. And Lobna is a program officer of a Special Protected Area Regional Activity Center, the CPRAC, and she's located in Tunisia. I know Lobna from several years, and I know that she's one of the main experts in the Mediterranean Sea on the impact of marine litter on sea turtle, and she will explain also how is important the study on the species in terms of monitoring. And the other speakers of this interactive section will be another very good friend of mine, Celia Leravac, that is a project officer of ACCOBAMS Secretariat. ACCOBAMS, as you probably know, is the agreement of the conservation of cetacean and Black Sea and Mediterranean Sea contiguous area. And Celia is involved for several years in the commitment of conservation of biodiversity on Mediterranean Sea. And
Christina, apologies to interrupt, but just to inform you that we are running about 15-20 minutes over time. So if we can try and wrap this session up in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like just to move to the next slide, because we have asked to our two friends, Lobna and Celia, to give some point of view concerning this main point of link between science and policy. So I would like just to ask a very short question from Lobna and then from Celia to the three main questions that we have on the floor. So the first one is, what are some of the ongoing actions that are addressing to monitor the impact of marine litter on biodiversity in the region? So Lobna, I give you the floor for 2 minutes.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Christina. And I'm Lobna bin Nakla. And thank you for all the organizers for inviting us in this important gathering. So with the reference to this question, I think that as already said by Mr. Kayala from MedBioL, as UNEP and component, we are working on the implementation of the regional plan on marine litter management. This action plan, this regional plan adopted in 2013. And within this plan, we succeeded to have a project to implement and to address marine litter reduction, prevention, and monitoring. Among this project, the EU funded the Marine Litter Med project, phase 1 and phase 2, but also the emails agreement with the Ministry of Environment from Italia, and the EU also ICAP Med 2 and ICAP Med 3. And as a SPARAC biodiversity component of UNEP MAP, we succeed during the phase 1 of this MedLitter project to have an agreement by the contracting party on the most impacted species in relation to the candidate indicator 24 related to marine litter ingested or entangled by endangered species, with a particular focus on marine charter. So there is an agreement by the contracting party to work on this candidate indicator on marine charter and mainly Carita. And within this species, also we prepared a monitoring protocol with NDC project to assess the interaction of marine litter on sea charter. And within this also project, we organized sub-regional training, mainly for the South Mediterranean country, to implement this protocol and to adapt this protocol to their capacity and to their capacity. Of course, this was done in 2 languages, English and French speaker. So within also this phase of project, we prepared operational strategy for monitoring this candidate indicator. This operational strategy has been prepared as guideline to give the contracting party and to support them in designing and developing their monitoring program. And as I said, there is another project, which is the ICAP Med 2, that also succeed to assist a country to develop their national monitoring program on marine litter for 3 common indicator, the indicator 22, 23, and also the IMAP candidate indicator 24. So this is the main activity that has been provided to the contracting party to implement, to monitor, and to assess the candidate indicator 24. for. But of course, we are continuing to support contracting party to the Barcelona Convention within the phase 2 of the Marine Litter Med project. And this will focus mainly to undertake capacity building in relation with this candidate indicator 24. And we are supporting and we starting supporting country to further advance and operationalize the monitoring, the effective monitoring of this common indicator with the focus on the ground implementation. There will be an implementation of this harmonized protocol on the ground to collect data and to report to the Secretariat with national data. And this is also will be done in through developing reporting template and data standard and data dictionary based on agreed standardized monitoring protocol. So yes, and just a final also ongoing action is
give the floor to Celia for the thank you.
Yes, this is the final action that we are doing also with ICAP map with the ICAP Med 3 project. We are supporting countries to implement their monitoring program on the monitoring program, yes, and with this data we will contribute to the elaboration of the 2023 Med quality status report for the Mediterranean region.
Thank you very much, Lobna, and I think you have very, in a clear way, answer also to the second question. So what is the role of a UNEP map, a CPRAC in implementing the activity on Caretta Caretta? Then we have another voice on this scenario, that is the voice of ACCOBAMS, concerning the attention on another group of species that are marine mammals and particularly cetaceans. Celia, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you to all organizers for inviting us as ACCOBAMS Secretariat to contribute to this event. And indeed, marine litter issue is the main threat for cetacean species in the Mediterranean. I think that regarding the ongoing actions, the main points have been already highlighted by the different speakers this morning. And our role as regional organization, and Lobna was also highlighting these points in a reply just before me. Our role as a regional organization is also to support all the countries of the Mediterranean to implement similar activities. And this is related to the harmonization of monitoring protocols. And this is a key elements if we want to progress together in improving the knowledge on the impact of marine litter on biodiversity. So at the level of ACCOBAMS, we have been adopting at the last meeting of the parties in 2019, an harmonized protocol for necropsies of stranded cetaceans. And this protocol, for example, includes a section dedicated to the assessment of marine litter on cetaceans. And as Lobna was also mentioning, once we have harmonized protocol, it's important to train all stakeholders around the region to implement similar protocols. So another main important actions we led as ACCOBAMS is also to train veterinarians around the Mediterranean in the different Mediterranean countries to implement these protocols and to build their capacities to assess and to monitor all marine litter impact cetaceans. Another important aspect of our role is also to be able to establish state of knowledge at the regional level. As we have seen this morning, the data information on marine litter and on impacts of marine litter on biodiversity is increasing around the region. But there are still some areas from which we do not have any information. And our role in that is also to be able to provide to the decision makers, that means to the countries and to the parties, involved in ACCOBAMS or in the Barcelona Convention to provide them with the best available knowledge on the situation. And regarding the second part of the question, what else could be done? We have seen this morning that there are different group of researchers focusing on different taxa, and the knowledge have been improving a lot regarding this taxa. But I think we are still missing an overview of how marine litter impacts the biodiversity in general. We still have approach and focus on different taxa, but I think at some point it would be good to have a clear overview of the general situation for the biodiversity, because we know that all taxa are threatened, they are under different pressures, but we are still lacking this overview.
Thank you very much, Celia, and I think you touch a very important concept, because when we discuss about impact on biodiversity, obviously we have to explore the topics on the wide range of species that inhabit the Mediterranean Sea and European water. And definitely all of us, we totally agree with to have one main candidate indicator that will be caretta, but even if you want to give a more wide scale of the impact on biodiversity, we have to explore the total biodiversity. That is not meaning all the species in the Mediterranean Sea, but some more important sentinel species. Then I would like to give you the floor for the last question that I think is the most tricky one. How can scientists work together better to improve monitoring in the impact of marine litter on biodiversity across the region? That is more or less the question that Celia had already point out. So Lobna, I give you just 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then Celia to give this final message to all our group of scientists that are waiting for your output. The microphone, Lobna, microphone, please, sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Christina, for this question. Yes, I think that scientists is among the main stakeholders that they have the role to come back with the main data in order to discuss with the government and to build management measure. So I think that we cannot work if there is no strong synergy between the ongoing project in the Mediterranean. So my main recommendation is to enhance and establish strong synergy with the project in the Mediterranean. Of course, in order to start the implementation of harmonized approach at regional, sub-regional, and even national level. So, of course, also the idea is that these scientists stay together and work for the cross-border cooperation, mainly with non-European countries. The idea is to build collaboration project, sub-regional project, north-south, south-south, in order to have the same level of knowledge and the same level of measure to combat this this problem. And as a regional institution, we are here to support scientists to develop this kind of project and to implement between scientists, but as I said, to translate this knowledge on management measure that the Barcelona Convention or ACCOBAMS could discuss with the representative of government. And thank you.
Totally agree. And Celia, your point of view on this important aspect?
I will go in the same direction than Lobna was explaining and presenting. As we have seen this morning with the different presentation from the speakers, the marine litter is an issue for all taxa, for all biodiversity. So working together to tackle and to assess this issue, to assess the impact on biodiversity is important. We know that the biodiversity is under a lot of threats and pressure. It's not only one species. I mean, we are here speaking about the biodiversity component of the ecosystems. So joining our forces for common messages about the impact of marine litter on biodiversity is important. It's important for decision makers because, I mean, it's not because, I mean, for them and at the level of the policies, the environmental policy, we really need of sorry, I'm losing my my ideas, but yeah, I mean, joining forces I think would be the main messages if we want to make concrete progress in terms of improving the future of the environmental policies related to the protection of biodiversity in the next years.
Thank you very much, Celia, and thank you very much, Lobna, for your very precise concept. And I think the idea to work all the Mediterranean Sea together in a common strategy that is obviously under the umbrella of UNEP map, the main message, I think all we agree with this. And thank you again to participate in the events. And then I think we have to move to the last part of our section. Would like to have the next slide concerning if there is any question from the speakers, or I don't know if from the you receive already some question that we can move to the specific speakers. Anushka, do you know if there is any question from all our...
I think we're just waiting now to see if any questions are coming up.
Perfect.
Okay.
If you want, we can move also to the next slide. That is the question that we are asking to our audience. So in the next slide.
Christine, I see a question here. What is the call to action? In the chat box.
Yes. I mentioned the last slide concerning what do you think is the most critical information of knowledge we need to help. That means that one. Perfect.
Okay, so the question was, what is the call to action? So do you have a call to action for participants who are listening today with regard to scientific knowledge and bridging that gap between science and policy? I think, in fact, one of the things we will be doing later on after the lunch, after our session 3, we will be talking specifically about calls to actions. So maybe we'll leave the answers to that for the next session and session 3 and call to actions after the lunch.
Perfect. So I think we can move to finalize this section. I think we have a lot of very interesting presentation concerning the general approach, how to investigate the impact on biodiversity on Mediterranean Sea. And we have several case studies that illustrate in a very clear way how several species can be dramatically impacted to marine litter. We investigate also the connection between ocean health and human health, and the final message was, on my point of view, how science and governance have to work together in order to orientate both the future governance on Mediterranean level, but even to orientate better science. With this, I would like to pass my great thanks to all the speakers that have participated to the section, and my great thanks to the organizers again of this interesting meeting. Thank you very much, and enjoy your coffee, and we convene again, I think, in 15 minutes. or less.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina, and all the speakers and panelists for today for a most very interesting and informative session. So we are going to take a little break now so we can have a stretch and a bit of a coffee and refresh ourselves for the next exciting session that's going to talk about policy. But before we go to the break, even as we're logging off and as we're going to the break, but actually please don't log off, keep open the Zoom because we will have some music playing to tide us over the coffee. But I would like to ask you one question. And please, I would also like to remind you, you don't need to wait for an invitation to answer a specific question in the chat box. At any point throughout the day, while our speakers are speaking or our panelists, feel free to write your comments, suggestions, or even questions in the box for us to be taking note of. So the question I would like you to ask now is, maybe we could ask, what do you think is the most critical information or knowledge that we need in order to help us come up with solutions for the marine pollution problem? So perhaps you could write those answers in the chat. And when we come back from coffee break, we will have a look at some of those answers and share them with the group. So what do you think is the most critical information or knowledge we need to help us come up with the solutions for the marine pollution problems? Okay, so we will take a 10-minute break. And if we could all make sure that we're back by 11 o'clock, where we'll be starting at 11 o'clock sharp, our next session. Enjoy your break.